everybody. I'm Roy,
Oops.
Title I school. Title of today's presentation is STEM and Making in the Classics Classroom. And by classics, I mean like ancient Latin and Greek, because that is how I started my STEM journey and making journey is from that perspective. I was trained as a Latin teacher. And it was at my original school where I taught here in Baton Rouge, not the one I'm currently at, where we had a STEM instigator, coordinator who asked us to kind of consider bringing STEM into our classrooms. And I know it might sound crazy that I, as a Latin teacher, was thinking about this, but to be honest, I had always been really interested in the perspective of the ancient Romans in particular being these, STEM masters, aqueducts, Colosseum, like all these amazing structures. So I started to play around with the idea of creating a class that I would just call Roman technology. And my STEM coordinator at my original school helped me to kind of think through like what I would do for that. It was not long after I developed this class that there came to be really some big interest in me having this class not as a Latin class. The first iteration of it was like an upper level class where we read the works of Vitruvius, who was this ancient engineer, architect of first century BCE Rome. And I had so many kids approach me who saw some of the projects we were working on who said, we'd really like you to offer this class like for us, like for anybody to take it, to not be, an upper level Latin class. So just as I was thinking about this, my principal came to me and said that they were in talks right with the headmaster to end the middle school Latin program, which was what I had been instrumental in growing at the school. Why they were doing this, I still to this day am not clear on why, but it prompted me to look around at other positions. They wanted me to take a teacher tech position at the school, and I've always been someone who would rather work with children. So, as luck would have it, there was a local public school who had not had a Latin teacher for over 2 years, and they were looking, but the position was only part time. And the principal wanted to know if I could offer any other electives. And of course, I said yes. I have this great class that I want to develop called Roman Technology. And she said, great, do it. I'm going to make you a full time, teacher. So flash forward now 8 years, and this presentation is about the things that we have done in this class, and just my program in general. So I actually teach 3 classes now. Of course, I do still teach Latin, but I also have developed 2 classes. Roman Technology is the one that I'm telling you about originally. We recreate the products and processes of ancient Roman daily life using experimental archaeology, hands-on history, STEM, making, all kinds of things. And then another one that I developed to capitalize on the interest in mythology of the students is one that I call Myth Makers. And we use ancient Greek and Roman myths as inspiration for maker projects. They're both 1 year in length and they are elective. So any student can choose these classes. They do not have to be in the Latin program. So I kind of try to categorize all the things that we do so these are my 4 types of learning experiences that we have in this class. Obviously, we do STEM challenges. We give like a whole new, view of catapults because we go back to the ancient uses of catapults, how they were used, how they were developed. The students have to build catapults. We do the same with ships, bridges, dice towers, aqueducts, shadoofs, all these things that the Romans are kind of well known for. The students do build models of these. But my favorite STEM challenge that we do is this dice tower challenge. And in case you are not clear or have never heard of a dice tower, this is a dice tower. The Romans use these as kind of anti-cheating devices for their dice games. And they're amazing. So they have these little inner mechanisms that kind of jostle the dice around. And then the dice kind of bounce out on those little stairs that you see in this picture. This is one of the most famous ones. out there. And so the students have to figure how these work and build one. So you see here, this is kind of one of my lessons. If you go onto my website and look for one of my lessons, this is kind of what you see. I have extensive information about the archaeological evidence for the objects, because that's a big thing we often talk about, is how do we know what we know about the ancient Roman and Greek world. So we look at our archaeology, we look at finds from archaeological sites, and then I usually have a little, inspiration video for them to watch to kind of, get them, spark their interest. They then are presented with the design challenge, and they, get all their materials. I teach them how to use the materials, but it's up to them how to build. As you know, y'all all know what STEM challenges are, so I'm not going to go much more into that. So another type of thing that we do is, of course, making or tinkering. In this, I use mainly in my myth makers class, where this kids have to, build things such as scepters. Because, you think about all the Roman and Greek gods, they each had a scepter or wand of power that they would use to represent their power. So the students are challenged after learning about those with designing one of their own. And I was telling Godwin earlier how she was a big inspiration to me because, my school, we're a Title I school. We don't have a lot of extra funding for these types of programs. So I am often scrounging around for grants, for fellowships that I can, be a part of to earn money for these projects. But what makes her work so accessible is that it's just paper, scissors, tape, and we use a lot of her work in some of these challenges. So I'm grateful to her, and so love that she asked me to do this presentation today. So here are some of the other little scepters they made. Simple paper, I know, and they're in middle school. So another one of our big projects the past couple of years was called the Penelope Project. So one of the things the students learn to do in the mythology class is weaving, and we connect this to the story of Arachne and Athena. And it was around this time that the students, our school was beefing up its security because we'd had some incidents where kids brought guns to school. And, I know as teachers, y'all can all connect to that fear. So the school district decided that they would encircle every school in this ugly black chain link fence that you see here. And the students were complaining about it nonstop, talking about how it was ugly. We were imprisoning them and all these things. So I came up with the idea, since they had learned to weave, then why don't we beautify it in some way? So we turned this into a nice little service project based on the weaving skills that they learned. And you see the girls here weaving the fence with these beautiful colors. It was also a design competition. All the students were asked to design, the fence and how it would look after we did it. And this is how it ended up coming out at the end. And this is the front gate of our school, where all the students go through the metal detector every day. So it's just so nice to see it. We've had so many people comment how nice it is that, we did this. And the kids just had an amazing time doing it. So another part of the lessons we do in my class is what I call experiential learning. As students learn to dye and spin fabric. We weave, as I said earlier. We even do a hairstyling challenge. The Romans used just really water and a sewing needle and thread to actually sew the hairstyles into place. And my girls really, really love this challenge. We actually forage for oak galls and do ink making and write on papyrus, all these different things that, really, it's not a STEM challenge, but it's just giving students an experience of what it was like to use these tools in ancient times. The last type of thing that we do, these are mostly our bigger projects, are experimental archaeology. So in these, we are helping students to imagine the daily experiences of ancient people by recreating the products or processes. So for example, we did this big sundial project, and this is one of the pictures here. of it. We chose to do an analematic sundial, which works with the viewer's shadow. So this is not my student, but it's a really good picture of an analematic sundial, and you can see him standing on a particular location on the dial. That is the month. So he's standing there, and his shadow is showing you the time over here in this area. So there was actually a very famous sundial from the Roman world. It was Augustus who built it, first emperor of Rome, called, and it's just called the horologium, which means sundial. And it could have been an analematic sundial. So in addition to learning about sundials in general, we had to take it to the next level. I wanted students to experience what it was like to make mosaics. So here's our little stone cutting workshop. We got a grant so that we could purchase stone cutting hammers and wedges. And you see the kids here making lots of little tesserae for our mosaics that we created for the sundial. So each student in this particular class had to design and produce one part of the sundial, either one of the months or one of the numbers. And you see the numbers here. So that's kind of how it came out. We consulted with a historical stone cutter in England, and he helped the kids to understand what to do, how to do it, and it came out pretty good. This was our final product, and it does work. Has stood the test of time. Not to be ironic, but it does really work. And you can see some of the months here: October, February, January. These are really cool sundials. So we also did a kiln project. This was also a design project. The students had to study ancient kilns and how they worked. And we tried to produce some little pieces of votive pottery. And we were not super successful because it was extremely cold. I know, Louisiana, crazy, but when we did this project, it was early February, and it just so happened to be one of the coldest weekends of the year. Dipped down into the 20s, which is odd for us, and we just couldn't get our little kilns to heat up enough. And the students, in typical STEM challenge fashion, were already thinking about, what can we do? What can we change when we do this again? Our principal has tasked me for our next challenge, to build a bread oven, a brick bread oven based on the ancient brick ovens of ancient Pompeii. And I keep telling her, yes, we can do that. We'll get to it. But we keep having these amazing projects. So one of my students mentioned one day that, why don't we try building a Roman road? And I thought, okay, that's crazy. We could never do that. But then, things happen, and we actually did. So the space you see here beyond where this boy is standing is a very swampy area between two parts of our school, and pretty much an unusable space. So we decided that we would build a sidewalk basically in the style of an ancient Roman road. So we started with reaching out to the Department of Transportation and Development, and we found a wonderful person there who wanted to help us, Dr. Tyson Rupnow, who told me that modern civil engineers really, really get into ancient Roman roads. So he was really interested in helping with this project. So the first thing we had to do was to survey the space and make sure that we were going to make the road straight. So what you see here is an ancient Roman groma that we built. You can't see the little plumb lines, but they are hanging, and we had to align those to get them. You can see here in the background the little lines that we've set up. These have to be set up so that we can line up the sides of the road. Well, so we tried some different experiments that we had read about. One of them was that when you try to sight these lines, the lines constantly swing in the wind. So that was a problem because you really need an accurate reading. So we had read about this study that said the Romans used little pots of oil to stop the bobs from swinging. And when we tried it, of course, it worked like a charm. You can see this bob is like slightly hanging in the oil. And so we felt like we really did good work here in figuring that out. It was really fun for the kids to see. You can see one of my students here citing one of the lines. This is Dr. Rupnow here, helping him to do that. And he was just so helpful, helping us all along the way. You can see the little lines here. And here's our finished product. I have like whole presentations on this. It was a 2-month project. Here's our finished product. And it turned out great. But this was, of course, the night before a Mardi Gras parade that lined up at our school. And when we got back to school that next Monday, someone had ridden a bike through the entirety of the wet concrete. And it just like, we were just floored by that. We didn't know what to do. We were really upset. I told the kids that we had one day to be mad, and then we would just try to figure out how to fix it. And we ended up fixing it. You can see the one of the ruts here. We had read this article about how the ancient Pompeians used molten iron to fix their roads. And I do teach middle school, so I was a little nervous about using molten metal. So instead we used some resin and tainted it with a golden kind of bronzy residue. And that ended up being great, and it worked out just fine. But these gashes are a sign that we, could get past something. And our road is still used today. We love it. Our school loves it. Right now, we are currently working on what's called the Roman Shoe Project. We are attempting to make our own shoes out of leather. So in this picture, the students are starting out slow. They're learning how to use leather punches and stamps. They created their own leather bullae. These were ceremonial protective necklaces in ancient Roman times. So they've been, practicing with awls, hammers, working leather. And, the part of the reason why I love using experimental archaeology in these projects is because if you know anything about the literary record, literary works of our time from that period, is that they were mainly written by, men and those who had the time and resources to write. And so our record from that period is really limited. And hands-on work really helps you to understand what people who are what I call the unheard voices of those times experienced. And I want my students to understand the full picture of the ancient world, which wasn't always pretty. So I'm Natalie, and if you have questions or you're interested in any of these types of lessons from this perspective, I write a blog called All STEM Leads to Rome. I talk about all this stuff extensively. I also have a website, and I can, send that to Godwin if you should need it. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. That is just really a fraction of the stuff that we do. So I'm, grateful to learn from y'all and hope that if you're interested, you reach out.
Okay, great. That was spectacular. Okay, I'm going to actually